You must be glad anyway after yesterday's show in Gothenburg. I've heard it was very good indeed.
It went very well. Generally, the shows have been going well, and we've been getting increased audiences from last time we played in Europe. And yeah, the Swedish ones, well, one so far. It's been really good, and tonight we're hoping for an even better one here in Stockholm.
What do you think of our local pride and joy, the Globe here?
Well, it seems quite a nice place, you know. Surprisingly okay sound, considering it's so sort of big and such a high ceiling and everything. But reports are that people quite like it, I gather. So
it'll be the biggest thing you've done in Sweden, certainly, anyway.
Yeah, in Sweden, yeah.
Du har rest upp från Göteborg alltså?
Ja, jag reste ner till Göteborg och så reste jag upp hit igen.
Jaså, är de så bra så att du vill se dem på dag i dag?
Ja, det är 7:e gången jag ser dem. I fjol såg jag dem 3 gånger. Jag såg dem först i Hamburg. Sen så åkte jag upp och såg dem i Stockholm och Göteborg. Året innan såg jag dem 2 gånger i Göteborg.
Finns det några som är bättre då?
Nej, absolut inte. Det finns inte närheten av sig.
It really seems that Depeche Mode fans are so loyal and dedicated, and it's hysterical almost. How do you explain all this?
Yeah, they're particularly fanatical. I don't really have a decent explanation for it, other than the fact that we've played live a lot over the years. We've toured hard around Europe and America, in fact. And I suppose a lot of that following comes from the live performance. But, you know, it's difficult to explain exactly what it is about music or whatever that makes them such a hardcore following. But it's quite interesting because it means, you know, certainly in England anyway, that our records always go in the charts straight away in the first week. In fact, sometimes they move too quickly for our liking because it means all the hardcore fans buy the record and they don't have a chance to cross over to new people and other people. But we're not complaining. But it's a slight problem sometimes, but it means you don't have to rely on the radio. And English radio does very much dominate what gets into the charts. So there's a few groups like us who can actually get around that, but because of their hardcore following. And you know, there's a few other groups like that, Cure, New Order, have similar kind of following.
Ja, Davidson, han dansar väldigt bra tycker jag.
Men musiken då?
Ja, den är också bra. Ja. Det är där man går hit för att lyssna på också.
Ja, och se på dem också?
Ja.
Vilken låt eller vilka låtar är bäst?
Halo och World in My Eyes.
There's a bit of a difference between the American audiences and the European. The European audience seem to be becoming more male orientated. They used to be quite female. Now well, in Germany we played the other day that it was like 80% male. In America it's more like a cross section. It's also more of a sort of quite well-off middle class kind of crowd, whereas it's perhaps a more working class kind of audience in Europe, or in parts of Europe anyway. But, you know, we don't concentrate too much on who our audience are. I mean, we welcome anyone who wants to listen, and we like as many people as possible to hear the music, you know, and we just get on with what we do and basically try and please ourselves. You know. Well, I mean, I think we can always improve, you know, I think we have a lot of potential still to fulfill, and, you know, I think we can make much better records, you know, which is the only reason to carry on anyway. If we feel that we're not moving forward, then we shouldn't be existing. So that's the only real ambitions, you know, is to you'll be just striving to make the ultimate record, the perfect record, which you can't make. But it's the only real ambitions I think we have. You know, obviously we want to be successful and sell records, but it's not the, you know, there's only so far you can take that before it becomes just a complete power trip to you. And, we want the music to get across, but we won't compromise what we do or sacrifice our integrity to do that. You know. I think we've come in and out of fashion, actually. I think recently, yes, we've gained a bit more respect back that we perhaps lost in the early days when the group was very naive and perhaps didn't promote itself quite as well as it could have. There's many reasons, I suppose, but basically because we've stuck to our ideas and our aims, really, and we haven't tried to follow trend or fashion. We've found ourselves coming in and out of fashion. You know, at the moment we're probably back in a bit because there's a electronic kind of revival going on at the moment. A lot of dance, electro kind of records, you know.
Ja, jag har gillat Depeche Mode sedan 81. Jag har följt på det mesta, sett dem 84, 86, 88 och 90 då. Så jag var i USA i sommar så såg de. Och det, ja, i Philadelphia var det 22 000, sen i New York var det 42 000 i Giant Stadium. Så det var kanon.
I think when we're travelling around touring, for example, and we collect all the different reviews, and you usually find it's pretty much 50% really good and 50% bad. And that's often applied to the kind of critique that we've had over the years. So I don't really, we're interested to read it and to see what people say about it, but we don't want to take it too seriously. Well, I've always felt that any instrument is just another tool, and people talk about machines having emotion. No machine has emotion. The same as a guitar doesn't have an emotion, or any other equipment, piece of equipment or musical instrument. It's the people that have that, and the people that use them that control what they get out of them. So, we welcome technology, we welcome those machines because they give us more opportunity to explore and, finally hone down the kind of sounds we want to use to create the right kind of atmosphere for a song. And, I'm particularly interested in having that access to a wide variety of sounds. And it seems silly to restrict yourself to just 2 or 3, basic instruments, even though you can get a lot of different sounds out of a guitar, of course. But, why not use all those things? And we do, we use guitars a lot as well, which a lot of people don't realise, or they maybe do now, since the last album kind of featured them a bit more, perhaps. But we've used guitars and other acoustic instruments for many years as well. We've had to learn because we've been self-managed and still are, and we're quite quietly proud of that fact because it's quite rare amongst a group that have reached our particular stage, I suppose. And of course, along the way, we've made many mistakes, by having to get involved in areas of the business that might be a bit distasteful to us or we're not particularly interested in. We're quite good at allocating our roles within the group so that we don't step on each other's toes. Fletch, for example, doesn't necessarily get so involved in the studio, but he has an important role to play when it comes to dealing with our accountants and lawyers and those kind of people, which is all part of what you do. But I mean, ultimately, we want to have complete control over everything we do, as much as is humanly possible, and that involves all aspects of what the group is and does, and all the visual side. We try and choose people, we respect to work with, like Anton Corbijn, for example. And make all the important decisions ourselves. So yes, we've had to learn a lot about the business over the years, but we feel that now we have quite a lot of experience, both in the studio and outside. Well, we used to work with Dan Miller quite a lot. We don't work with him so much these days, although he does come in and do remixes for us occasionally, and we still have a very good working relationship with him. But he, being particularly busy now with Mute, which is a growing empire all the time, doesn't have really so much time to devote to studio work. So, and also we reached a stage working with Daniel where it got quite tense, I think, in the studio, and it was good for us to move on and do different things and work with different people. So more recently we've worked with more different people, like Flood on the last album. We had Francois Kevorkian, who came in and mixed it with us, and he's subsequently done some more remixing as well. But we are quite a tight unit. We don't easily bring other people into what we're doing. We've hardly ever, I don't think ever really, brought in any guest musicians. We feel that's a bit of an easy option, and so many other people do that and just pluck out the nearest, brilliant brass section or whatever, and it just seems like too easy an option to do that. So we very much like to take a more lateral route and look for a more interesting alternative. So, and I think we do, because we are such a tight unit, we find it quite difficult to immediately have a rapport with other people. It takes some time, so I suppose we're a bit nervous about doing that kind of thing. I mean, I think we are quietly confident about just about everything we do at the moment. Sometimes I think the promotional side of what we do is probably our least, our most difficult thing, perhaps. It's a thing that sometimes causes more conflict than anything else. When you're on the road and you're deciding about what interviews and what particular press you want to do, what kind of photographs, if you're going to do them at all, who should get what, which countries should take precedence. That kind of thing can create more stress when you're touring around, for example, than the actual gigs themselves, which, become very automatic and after a while quite easy, really. But, well, I speak for myself. Perhaps for Dave it's more hard work. But. So I think that's an area, the whole media side of what we do, where we're not quite so comfortable as perhaps when we're in the studio or performing. I think we're all quietly domestified, really, you know. And we like to let off steam, you know, like most people, particularly when you're touring, you know. The way to relieve stress and tensions, you know, but I wouldn't say rebellious particularly.
You give the impression perhaps very often of being a very serious group of people.
Yeah, well, that is a perception that people have of us, but in fact it's pretty untrue. And those people that are close to us and know us well know that to be untrue, you know. And I think that's a side of the group you do see if you watch the 101 film, which we made last year, which reveals the group in a very different way, you know. It tends to explore a little bit more the characters of the individuals and gives you a different insight as to how we interact, you know, as people. Although it's not particularly, I wouldn't say it's a particularly in-depth film, but it's quite light-hearted. But you know, there's certainly quite a strong element of humour in what we do and how we are as a group together. And yeah, a lot of people don't realise that. I think the main change at the beginning was when Vince left the group. He was the main songwriter and the main kind of workhorse, I suppose, you know. Everyone else was a bit lazy and happy to just go along with things, especially since it was all new anyway. So I think the main change obviously was then Martin taking over as the main songwriter and having to come to the front for someone who was, particularly at that stage, quite an introverted kind of character, although he's learnt to become a lot more extrovert these days, I think. But so he obviously had to come to the fore as a songwriter and has, in my opinion, over the years matured as a songwriter and is still producing great songs, I think. And I think, you know, soon after that we did a lot of travelling around the world. For the first time ever we went to Far East and all these kind of places, and being very young at the time it left quite an impression. I think that's the reason why that third album contained a lot of similar kind of subject matter. You know, you mentioned political. I wouldn't say it's really political, but it dealt more with kind of world problems, outward looking. It was more outward looking than subsequently, where most of his songs have been very much about personal relationships and very kind of about the self. And I think, you know, after that period, he really just cycles around a list of subject matters that he tends to, you know, go back to. He has a top 10 list of different subjects that he continually, you know, writes about that interest him, obviously.
Would Policy of Truth be a little bit of speaking from own experiences?
Well, probably, but you have to ask Martin because he wrote it. You know, I mean, he doesn't even explain his songs to us. You know?
No.
You know, obviously, if we have questions about them, he'll answer them. You know, but I mean, I like the idea as much as he does of interpreting them myself. You know, or leaving it down to the listener to interpret the meaning. And you know, I'm quite happy for them to be ambiguous, if they are. You know, some of them aren't. Some of them are fairly obvious. Some of them are much more ambiguous, could be about several different things. And that's fine with me, you know, I don't particularly want to delve in and find out exactly what he means, you know, that's his private affairs and that's his way of writing songs, you know, I know that's his preference. So ask him.
Look at the older material today.
Sometimes with regret, sometimes with, you know, with a certain amount of pride, sometimes I'm nonplussed by it, you know. I mean, you listen back and you can always find fault, of course, you know. And if you don't, then again, you know, you haven't progressed, so. But I don't particularly want to dwell on what we've done in the past, you know, I don't go back and listen to the old records very often. I don't really want to, you know. And what happens is we make an album, then we tour with it. So by the time we've finished 2 years on those same songs, you know, you're so sick of them. Doesn't matter how good they are. You're sick of them by then. You don't ever want to hear them again, really.
Are we going to see and hear less of Depeche Mode in the foreseeable future?
Well,
after this tour?
I'm not sure. I think naturally we will slow down. Most groups tend to do that. I think mainly because other things become more important in your life, perhaps, you know, than pop music. It's not necessarily that. You don't necessarily want it to completely dominate your life. On the other hand, I think we're getting on probably better now as a group than we ever have done. So, I mean, there's certainly no tension there to get away from each other particularly. But I think we're becoming very selective about what we want to do, you know. And each decision we make, you know, we don't take lightly, you know. We long discussions about exactly what we want to do and where we want to go next and what we want to try and achieve. And, so I think it's a question of quality over quantity. But we don't plan to stop or anything, you know. We carry on. We've got things to do next year, and you know, then there's the possibility of individuals doing their own things or other outside production work or whatever, you know. We don't plan that far ahead, so we just see, you know, maybe we plan 6 months to a year ahead. That's as long as we go, really. Well, I've been offered a couple of production things, which I'm considering. I'm not sure if I want to do or not. And then there's a possibility that I might want to do something on my own, which is, well, I did one record before a couple of years ago, which was mainly instrumental, and I might do something else similar to that. But I haven't made any definite decisions about it.
You all think about making videos?
We're quite happy to do it. I mean, sometimes it can be a chore, and especially when you find your schedule's very tight, you're in the middle of a tour and you've got to make 2 extra videos or something, and there's no time, and you know, you've done a gig and then you've got to get up at 8 o'clock to go out film in the cold somewhere, you know. But when you look back at what we've done, certainly over the last few years anyway, you know, you feel that it was worth doing, and we've certainly built up a good relationship with Anton Corbin.
When you get spare time, what do you do with it?
Go down to QPR.
What?
Down
Did Queen's Park Rangers?
QPR, yeah. Follow them around. No, pretty normal things. I mean, I've got a wife and, you know, family. I like to be at home, really, and do normal things. You know, go out to restaurants. I like going to the cinema. Yeah. I have a big variety of taste. I like even some classical music, and, you know, right through to some sort of thrash metal punky things. You know, it really depends. You know, there's usually good music to be found in most styles, you know. I mean, I don't particularly like heavy metal, and I don't like country music very much. You know, but there's quite a lot of the black kind of rapping music. Some of that's really good. Certainly a lot of the ideas that are behind them are good. Sometimes they're not really quite developed as much as they could be, perhaps. But I like the idea of non-musicians, if you like, being able to make music quite cheaply with the aid of, you know, cheap sampling machines, technology. And, you know, I think that's a healthy thing to be happening. So, you know, I'm quite interested to hear all these people and making almost what you might call bad quality records in their home, you know, but they have a spark of energy which so much sort of glossy music doesn't.
Alan, thanks for taking time out to talk
Pleasure.
to us, and I hope the tour continues to go as well as it's obviously doing at the moment.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.